This podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, one of the world's leading international professional bodies, which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. I'm your host, Jen Kidby, and in this series, I'm delighted to explore how leaders can bring coaching mindset and skills into their everyday leadership. I'll be discussing these themes with authors of the Association for Coaching's new book, Coaching as a Leader. Our aim is to inspire and equip you to help leaders strengthen cultures at work for future generations to thrive. Hello, and welcome to this episode in the Coaching as a Leader podcast series. In this episode, we're exploring the third part of the Association for Coaching's new book, Coaching as a Leader. This part of the book is about the opportunity for leader coaches to have an impact on the wider organisation. It goes beyond the direct impact leader coaches can have on their colleagues and teams to consider the actions that can strengthen the organisation at scale. One of the ways leader coaches can do this is to support the organisation's leadership development strategies by formally coaching potential future leaders. It can be incredibly rewarding as a leader to coach colleagues in different parts of the organisation, to know that you are making a difference in someone's career and you're also supporting the future leadership capability across the whole organisation. There's a lot for you as a leader coach to gain. You get to practice coaching skills and mindset. You get to be a part of somebody else's development and growth and see them grow over the years. And you also gain insights into the leadership reality for someone else in your organisation. From working with leader coaches who've done this, I've seen bonds build that have lasted for years. To help explore this a little bit further, I'm delighted to be joined by Linda Beatty, author of the chapter titled Formal Coaching as a Leader Coach. Linda is a senior manager of culture and engagement in Bank of Ireland. Based in Ireland, she has over 35 years' experience working in the communications and financial services industries. She is a marketeer, a customer experience professional, and a qualified executive coach. She's a passionate coaching advocate and believes that organizations thrive by embedding a coaching culture. In 2018, she founded and now leads the coaching community of practice within her organization, from which she set up an internal coaching faculty, resulting in her winning numerous recognition awards for enabling colleagues to thrive. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you, Jen. It's lovely to be here and thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. The chapter you've written, Linda, it does a really great job at unpacking the things for leader coaches who got this opportunity to formally coach. Before we get into that, and I know there's a lot to explore and cover, please tell us a little bit about your career journey and why this topic of leader coaches is so important to you.
Well, you mentioned in your introduction, I've been working for 35 years in media and financial services and predominantly in sales and marketing and probably always in people related roles. And the last 5 years I moved into customer insights, which was all around understanding more about customers and trying to, through that understanding, make real changes for customers to improve our products and services. And then very recently I've moved into customer advocacy, culture lead, and that's really about kind of embedding customer first mindset, which is similar to embedding a coaching first mindset. But about 10 years ago, I actually qualified as the coach, and it came from something I had seen 5 years prior to that in my organization and somebody who had inspired me. And from that, I've kind of gone on a coaching journey and delivered a lot of what I've done within my organisation. But what I seen at the time was, in my role, I was a trainer and I used to visit regions and I'd take 30 staff together and I would train them in particular products and services. And when I'd go out into the region, a region manager would attend and they'd support the day. But when I went to one region, the region manager said, Linda, I'm going to host the session today. I'll invite you in to deliver your key messages, but the session is going to be mine and I'm going to deliver it in a very specific way. And the way in which he delivered really inspired me, and it was something I had never seen before. And He placed all his audience sitting in a circle, 30 people. He set the scene. He was a fantastic storyteller, and he started to use metaphors. And I could see by the way he addressed the room, he was so inspiring. He inspired me in the day that I was there to go on and deliver my sessions in a very different way as I move forward. But after the session, I asked him where had he learned how to set his sessions up this way and, really engage his audience and bring them in. And he'd said to me, I am literally just after qualifying as a coach. And in that conversation, he asked me loads of coaching questions, what I didn't realize at the time were coaching questions. But from that day on, he inspired me so much that became my objective to become a coach. I want to study how to be a coach. I want to learn this craft. This is amazing. It really excited me. So that's really where my desire to be a coach started and led me then on this journey.
Wow. It's amazing. In speaking to the authors of the book, how many of us have had in our past that experience of somebody who has coaching skills and mindset, and they're just bringing it into who they are.
Yeah.
And it sounds like this person had a huge change the direction of your career.
Totally. And I could never have seen ahead what was going to happen for me when I actually then went and studied to be a coach, and having the opportunity to do that within my organization, I thought was phenomenal. But then when I actually qualified to be a coach, all of the things that I could deliver thereafter. And that set me on the journey of writing this chapter and then talking about formal coaching.
That's amazing. I wonder how many people you've since inspired in the same way that he inspired you.
Yeah. Well, I do know one of the things that happened, and we might talk a little bit about it, but I set up a coaching community in the organization. And part of that was bringing all colleagues together within the organization who are interested in coaching, who may not have been qualified, but were really interested in the language around coaching and really trying to bring coaching into their day-to-day role. And to inspire the community, every month I would invite kind of a guest speaker in to talk about a coaching topic. And within the speech, we do an exercise, a coaching exercise. And they were kind of called lunch and learns. So they could be external speakers coming in, but they could also be coaches within the organization taking a session and demonstrating how to use a coaching tool. And I ran these for about 2 years. And one Friday I was at my desk and I took a call from a colleague, and she said, Linda, today is my last day in the company. I'm moving on, and I'm so excited about moving on. But I'm ringing everybody today who inspired me, which I thought was lovely. And she was inspired, she said, by me as a coach leader, by the fact that I had given her so much access to coaching tools, that she learned so much about herself through the program. That was a lovely piece of feedback for me to get at the time, because I suppose one thing is when you coach one-to-one, you can assess how you're doing, but when you're bringing kind of events to people that are all on the theme, it's very hard to measure the success of that. Are the messages here landing for people? What are people taking from it? So for me, it really inspired me to actually do more in that space and bring more kind of thought leaders and coaching topics to life within the organization.
It just ripples through, doesn't it? And when you have leaders who are bringing it into everything that they do, not just when they're formally coaching, which I know we're going to come on to talk about, but all of those moments, it just ripples through. I love it. I love seeing that happen. What made you want to be a part of this author team?
Well, to be honest, in the beginning, I probably, like maybe the rest of the authors, felt like I had, why me? The imposter syndrome kicked in.
Oh, interesting.
Would I be capable of doing this? And I don't perceive myself to be, when I think books, I think academic. And one thing I learned from my coaching course and becoming a coach is that I am a practical learner. So I really am a practitioner. So teach me something, I'll practice it again. And that's what really inspires me. And that's how I learn. So I think, Jen, for you to include me in this was brilliant. And when I got over the whole, I can do this, the chapter for me was perfect because it was the most practical chapter in the book of how you can bring coaching to life within your organization. And I felt I would have a voice and be able to do that within the chapter.
I love all the chapters. What I love about your chapter is it does take that stance of how do you take everything that you've known and learn and you use it beyond your immediate team, because you might coach somebody in a totally different division or totally different department or function or specialism, which has its own challenges, which I know we'll come on to as well. I love that because it, to me, from my experience of working with leader coaches, it has impact at a bigger scale than me and my team or me and my direct report. So I'm very glad that you said yes and that you got over whatever that imposter syndrome was that was floating around. So we should probably get into your chapter a little bit. So let's start with, or the title of your chapter, Formal Coaching as a Leader Coach. Can you say a little bit about what that means, formal coaching as a leader coach?
I think at its simplest, when you think of formal coaching, it's very structured. It's a structured relationship between two people, the coach and the coachee. And in an organizational setting, that's obviously a colleague or an employee. In its structure, it's very formal. This is what I'm going to do for you. This is what I expect from you. This is how often we're going to meet. I am going to challenge you in our sessions. This is how long we're going to meet for. So you're really outlining in a structured fashion what you're committed to doing for that person. And equally, you're asking them to commit to this formal structure as well. So it's not side of the desk. It's not meeting somebody in the canteen for a coffee and chatting through an issue for 5 minutes. This is very much, I am providing my services to you for a 6-month period. I'm going to meet you 4 times in that time. This is what I'd expect you to do in this time. This is what I'd like from you. This is what I'm prepared to give it. So it's very specifically structured.
And from the way that you've written your chapter, it's typically with somebody other than your direct report. I mean, it can be with your direct report, but the way you've written about it, it's normally about somebody outside of that reporting line.
Yeah. It's typically with somebody you don't have a relationship with, or you don't have a managerial responsibility for this person. So it works best if the coach and the coachee come to it really unknown to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably where the best magic can happen and the best contract can be developed. So I would think for anybody advice, for anybody taking on formal coaching, look within your organization at people that you do not know now today or have a relationship with.
And you and I have both worked alongside leader coaches who've done this. So we've seen how they benefit and what they really enjoy about the experience. If there's someone listening who's thinking, oh, it sounds like it could be a bit tricky or it's another time commitment, what would you say to them? What's really in it for the leader coach to do this sort of work?
I think the big thing is the practice of coaching. I mentioned earlier on about being an academic or a practitioner. To be a coach, you have to have the knowledge around people, coaching tools, personality types, but you also have to be prepared to practice what you learn. So practice your questioning, meet lots of different people, get to know different personality types, and from every session that you do, you're learning more about yourself and an individual. So for somebody to decide to do this within an organization setting, coaches tend to want to practice, and it's very important to keep up your practice. So I think the key selling point for this initially would be that you're giving coaches a forum to practice their skills.
Yeah, there's nothing like particularly if you're a leader coach rather than an internal coach who might be coaching all the time. As a leader coach, maybe you're not doing that as often. It's a different setting, isn't it?
Exactly.
And what would you say to an organization? Why have leader coaches coached rather than an internal full-time coach or even an external coach? What's the benefit to be gained from having leader coaches doing this?
I think what you'll find is, and certainly, through research in the book and what I've seen in Europe, external coaches tend to be used at the C-suite level, the board level. And there's probably an expectation there that that's fine because there's so much confidentiality involved. You don't want the CEO disclosing to a leader coach on a coaching session, their thought process and all that. So there's a place for everything, right? I also think as well, internal coaching departments, to me, in the research that I've done, they're a luxury. So you tend to see more of organizations having coaches that are qualified and deciding to coach 5% of that time.
Mm-hmm.
So back to your question there, why would an organization ask their leader coaches to coach? I think you're tapping into a resource that you have within your organization. So you have a skill within your organization that you should leverage. It's almost like we have a project management team. You're going to go to them if you want them to manage a different project or a new system for you. So you go to the coaches and use their skill to coach individuals internally. The other thing about leader coaches, they have so much knowledge on the organization. They understand the the political landscape. They understand what's going on in the background in the organization in different areas. So they can bring that kind of insight to the relationship they have with their coachee.
When you say that, Linda, my mind goes back to another episode in this series, actually, where we explored technical expertise. And as a leader coach, you do have so much organizational knowledge about how to get things done, where the typical blocks are. We talked in that podcast about when is the time to bring in that expertise and when is the time to purely coach and just ask questions. In your experience, how do leader coaches, how should they be thinking about, well, I know where this person's getting stuck because I know the head of their department. I know what's worked in the past. And when should they hold back from doing that? How do you see that dynamic playing out for a leader coach?
Yeah, I think, it sounds like in that scenario, you're jumping to solutions all the time for the person. I think you have to trust the coaching process. You really need to be asking the questions to help inspire the thought process with that coachee, that they come to that solution themselves, that you're not providing solutions for them. I think, albeit if you can make life easier on this person by making an introduction, to somebody within the organization that might be useful for the person and connecting them with somebody that they don't know is there, I think that's fine. But I think you have to trust that the coachee's ideas are the best ideas. Your ideas are not the best ones for them.
Yeah.
So I think your role always as a leader coach is to ask the questions, incite the thought process for the individual you're coaching.
What I'm also hearing in what you're sharing is that as a leader coach, because you have got that organizational knowledge, it might guide your thinking about the sorts of questions that you might ask to keep the ownership with the individual.
Exactly.
There's a lot to set up to be able to do this. We've kind of leapt into it, but in able to do this really well, there is a lot to think about. I mean, you've already touched on the leader coach might know certain things about the organization. You've already touched on that decision around should we go with an external coach or an internal coach or a leader coach. From your experience, when an organization has made the decision, okay, we're going to tap into our leader coaches, we've maybe developed them with some coaching skills, coaching mindset, we're going to tap into that group and ask them to be a part of this formal coaching service that we're going to offer. In order to set that up really well, what could a leader coach expect? What does it look like when it's done really well?
I think the leader coach should expect a proper framework. So if you are committing as a leader coach to providing coaching hours, you as a leader coach need clear guidelines. How long is this going to be for? How many colleagues are we talking about? Do we have coaching policy there in the background that's going to guide the coachee? You really need to be confident that there's a process in the background that say, even for example, that maybe I'm matched with somebody that mightn't be suitable for me. How can you unmatch? So you need guidelines around that and expectations that are clear for both people. So I would expect as a leader coach to have some sort of a framework that I can work towards, timelines, know where I can go if something comes up in a session I'm a little bit worried about, and we'll probably cover that off in boundaries. I want to know that the organization has my back in this, that they've set it up in a way that it's robust enough, that nobody can challenge the process or challenge the credibility of the coaches as well. It's very important. And I think as a leader coach, I should feel supported through supervision and have access to the other coaches so that we can work together as a network and maybe create circles, have our supervision, and also probably be aligned kind of with an association like the Association for Coaching, that all the coaches have access to similar CPD, learning, code of ethics. So I'd expect that support from my organization to set me up for success as a coach, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And you touched on boundaries and the boundaries that need to be in place, and how the boundaries are often different from a leader coach than an internal coach or an external coach. From what you've seen work, what are the boundaries that are really important to have in place and to be transparent about for leader coaches to formally coach in this way?
I think contracting is so important, right? And it's always the thread that goes through everything in coaching. And it's very, very important to get your contract right on day one.
How much of that sits with the individual leader coach, and how much of it sits in the things that you were saying before, like the organization has created its own structure, it's this many sessions, it's this frequency? What's the bit that the leader coach maybe thinks about, and what's the bit that the organization thinks about with the contracting bit?
Well, I think the contracting piece will be very much obviously around how we're going to work together and all, but within there, you're going to have a piece around, I suppose, the safeguarding, if you like. So if you're working with a coachee and you might realize that maybe there's mental health issues, there may be a little bit of a danger to themselves or to somebody else, or what they're doing could be kind of sabotaging the company itself. So there has to be something in there around the contract to protect you against that. So at what point do I need to address this as a big issue, and where do I go if something like this happens? So it has to be very clear in the boundaries that if, and hopefully it doesn't come up, but you have to be confident in the 1% of the time that this is come up, that you have a place to go for this and you feel supported. And I think key to boundaries as well is having that supervision that you can take, like say issues that come up in sessions that you're a bit worried about, back into supervision, tease them through. I suppose one of the examples I talk about in the book is a coaching relationship that was set up between two people and they're unknown to each other. But as the sessions progress, you realise as you coach an individual, this person is very stressed. They're getting a heavy workload is being forced down upon them. You happen to know actually the manager in that area. So you have another insight into, well, actually, I know what the business agenda is here and I know what the impact that's having on the person. So there's kind of a conflict there. So your confidentiality feels conflicted for you because you kind of feel like, oh God, I actually really need to be talking to that manager about how much pressure they're putting on this individual, but you can't. And that's where I think supervision is very important, because you can bring that to your supervision, or even if you have a coaching circle, so you can bring those kind of issues into the circle and discuss them with other coaches and say, okay, this is a real life example for me of a boundary there's a conflict here for me. What do I do with it? So you need that support to help unpack it, if you like. And what do you do when your boundaries is kind of threatened?
It can be, from leader coaches I've worked with. I can remember a few conversations where someone would come to me and say, Jen, I haven't taken this anywhere else yet, but the person that I'm coaching, I'm hearing some things about what's going on in their part of the business. And I feel a responsibility as a more senior person. In this case, it was someone more senior. Who do I talk to without breaking confidentiality and without destroying trust and without undermining what we're doing or what the organization's doing? And it is different, isn't it, to if you're an external coach, because you don't have that wider organizational landscape.
And as an external, you don't really know what's going on in the background. But when you're internally, you're on the spot, there's always change in organizations as well. And you could have an awareness of that change and people that you're coaching don't, and you can see probably the impact that's having on them. They don't realize why it's impacting. They can't put words to it. It is a tricky one, but I think at the end of the day, that's why that contract is so important, and that piece in there around if you notice an issue, a problem that needs to be addressed, that you have a mechanism through which you can do that without breaking confidentiality. And you can refer the coachee as well back to the contract. Remember, I told you if a situation like this arose, this was the path I was going to take. Are you comfortable with me doing that?
Yeah. Being transparent from the beginning.
Exactly.
So many leader coaches in supervision will go back to the contract.
Yeah.
Or will say recontract, remind the person that you're working with that this is, and also this is the limits of your expertise as well. You touch on as well some of the issues that maybe a leader coach wouldn't get into because they're outside of what they can really coach on very well. From what you've seen, does formal coaching work better if the coach is more senior than the coach, where you have a leader coach? Does it work best? Can it ever work like peer on peer, or even kind of the opposite, someone more junior coaching someone more senior? What have you seen work?
I think it's a great question and observation. For me personally, as a leader coach, I have never actually once been asked, by a coachee, what level are you at within the organization? And I know a lot of the coaches that I work with are the same, right? Now I know and I respect in different cultures around the world, there are hierarchies within organizations which wouldn't allow for somebody more junior within the organization coaching somebody more senior. So, and I respect that would be there in some organizations. So I suppose I'm talking to what I've seen, let's say in Ireland. I haven't yet seen a coaching relationship breaking down or being challenged because of the level the individual and the coachee are at. At the end of the day, coaching is about two people coming together that are equal. Our thoughts are equal, and we come together to discuss a particular challenge or goal that coachee has, and together you work through it. I don't believe your position within the organization matters in that. And as I say, I haven't seen it to date being an issue. So I think at the end of the day, the coach is after going through coach training. They have the skills, they have the practice. So there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to coach a level above or a level above that again.
You talked about two people coming together and how that issue of seniority, in your experience, it rarely comes up. And at the same time, if you're a leader within an organization, there is a hierarchy. So if a leader coach is coaching someone more junior than them, what can a leader coach do to create that openness, that psychological safety, so that the coachee feels they can be open and transparent?
I think for that senior leader, you have to share a piece of yourself. So you have to bring your authentic self to that relationship and share insights into you and maybe how you were stuck at a particular moment in time, or when you had, I'm making the imposter syndrome up, when a situation like that came up for you as an individual. So I think as we look up within our organization, the more vulnerable our senior leaders are, the better for us, because they resonate more with us. They show us that it's okay to not be perfect, that we can say, well, this person, even at that level, imagine they made that mistake and this is what they learned. And imagine they actually had lack of confidence at one point in, when they had to do something. So I think if that senior leader, it's just themselves and just share when they were vulnerable and help the coach to connect with them, on a very personal level. I don't think people realize how personal coaching is until they actually get into the relationship and they really see as they get into it why confidentiality is so important, because lots of things are shared within the room that maybe neither person actually envisaged being shared. So it's very important, I think, to be open and honest and share your own personal experiences so you can meet at a basic level.
As you're saying that, Linda, my mind's going back to something that you mentioned earlier in this conversation about the structure that the organization can put in place. Because the more structure that there is around
Yeah.
clear guidelines of around what is the confidentiality and how many sessions do we have and where do you go to if you're not sure, if you're hearing something that you need to share, or how can you set somebody else up to feel safe and have rapport with you and to trust in this conversation. It's the more that we're talking about this, the more that how well it's set up in the organization becomes critically important.
It's so important that your coachee trusts you, that they feel that they can open up, that they feel that there's no hidden agenda. I described one example in the book of meeting a very senior leader, and they'd been offered an external coach and they were going through the whole coaching process. And the coachee, if you like, the person that was coached was like, I don't know. I mean, there's only so much I'm going to share in those sessions because obviously everything is discussed back at the organisation level. And I was shocked to hear him saying, but did you not contract with your coach? Was confidentiality not discussed? And this person had no memory of any of that. They just made an assumption that because the company had organised this for him, they were going to hear about what went on in the room between two people. So trust is incredibly important, that both people bring them their full self and trust each other and are as open and honest as they possibly can be within a session.
I love what you touched on a few moments ago about the leader coach being a little bit vulnerable and open about themselves and how that can really shape someone else at
Yeah.
an earlier stage of their career to hear, wow, this person I'm working with, they've had to develop and grow and they've failed at some things and have had to try again. Even just being in that conversation can have a big impact.
And I think as leader coaches, really, you have no business getting into that unless you're prepared to be vulnerable. I think coaching is about being open and honest and sharing when things didn't go right for you. And as a leader coach, you're probably sharing some of yourself in your sessions, but you're also sharing your story with your fellow leader coaches.
Mm.
And that's very important, that you use each other as a network and be vulnerable with them. So as a coach, you see your colleagues who are as coaches, your peers. So you want to them appear to be a good coach as well. But to be a good coach, you also have to share with them your vulnerabilities and be center stage, I think, with them, and have them pull your practice apart a bit and, work with you to help you improve as a coach.
It can be quite humbling.
It is.
For a leader within the organization
Yeah.
to do this. And you just touched on something that I wanted to ask you to say a bit more about. What can someone who's responsible for maybe setting up leader coaches, what can they think about putting in place to really support leader coaches and to make it successful?
I think probably a lot of what we spoke about, the making sure there's a robust framework, maybe a really good contracting template, that kind of access to supervision, leading out on the group so that they'll form kind of circles. So tap into their peer resources, thought processes, share learnings from, I'm not talking about bringing kind of, this is what happened in this session, but it's all about you. This is how I felt about something that happened. I really want to explore that further. Tapping into each other to learn more about their own practice. Having access to thought leaders in this space that you're constantly learning and developing as a coach. I think that's the other thing as a leader coach. You really need to be open to constantly learning and discovering new things about your practice. So I think as a leader coach within an organization, then I expect access to all of those things to help me perform to the best that I can as a coach.
And I don't know if you see this as well, but one of the things I've seen is when leader coaches do come together and they share some of what they're learning about themselves, it goes way beyond them as a formal coach.
Yeah.
So many times I've worked with a leader coach who said, I noticed that urge to give advice. And it's not just in coaching. I see it in my day-to-day life as well. and I'm working on holding back and asking a question instead. So although the learning might be coming from being a formal coach, the application of that, like the practical application of that learning goes into so much more than purely coaching.
Yeah. I think you can sign up for a job as a leader coach and expect to work with a colleague on their personal development without being on a continual personal development journey yourself. You're asking within your sessions for a coachee to do a lot of hard work on themselves. So I think as a coach, you need to have an expectation that you will do the same amount of work on yourself.
Yes. Yeah. You do the work on yourself
Yeah.
before you expect somebody else to go there. Linda, as we begin to wrap up this conversation, and I know there's so much more in the book that you go into so much detail around how to prepare yourself and how the organization can set this up for success and what to expect. But as you think about all of your experience, all of what you captured, what's one piece of advice you would give to a leader coach who's thinking about doing formal coaching in their organization?
My piece of advice would be to tell them to get involved, to practice, push themselves outside their comfort zone and tackle it head on. I suppose that was the one probably fear I encountered of other coaches within the organization as we set about a formal coach program together, was getting coaches to be brave and put themselves forward to coach. So I think be brave, coach. You're not going to do any wrong. You're going to be brilliant. There's never a session that you leave that there wasn't something in it for both individuals. You learn so much from it about people, but also about yourself. So be brave and tackle it head on. Put your name forward.
There's so much, isn't there? So many leader coaches that I've worked with have said, I didn't realize I was going to get so much from this experience. I know I think you open in your chapter with a story about that.
Yeah.
What it's like for the leader coach to have done this.
Exactly.
That's amazing. And what's one question that you'd encourage a leader coach to ask themselves to make formal coaching successful?
I suppose probably asking themselves, where do I add value? What can I bring to this situation?
It's a great answer. Where do I add value, right?
Yeah.
Because now maybe the value that you add as a leader coach isn't your expertise, your technical expertise, but the value you bring is being in conversation and creating that space for someone else to. It's different, right?
It's very different. And every coach coaches differently. And every coach has their own story and their own experiences to bring, their own life experiences, their own organization's experience. So I think that's it. It's like, where can I have the impact here?
Linda, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. And thank you so much for working with us over the last 3 years as well to create this book. I know this is something you are so passionate about and are so skilled at doing as well, from the awards that you've won and the impact that you've had. So thank you for sharing some of that expertise with us today.
And thank you for asking me to be part of this journey. I've enjoyed every minute of it so far, and I'm sure there's more excitement to follow. Thank you, Jen.
I think there will be. Thank you, Linda. Thank you for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. For over 20 years, our purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organisations, and society. To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or visit our webpage at associationforcoaching.com. To help you develop your coaching expertise, you can also explore our digital learning hub and enjoy our extensive library of on-demand webinars, member benefits, interviews, podcasts, and a portfolio of live events featuring thought leadership, tools, models, and the latest industry trends.